Hey guys, happy Sunday. Here, sorting laundry. I've been listening over and over again to the exchange between President Trump and President Zelensky. For those of you who are new here, I'm Jenna. I'm a journalist. I've been a journalist for 20 years. I'm also the founder of Smarter News. And one of our key missions is that you have a place to go for quick, concise, nonpartisan news where you can hear multiple sides of a story and make up your own mind. And certainly there are a lot of different points of view when it comes to this exchange between President Trump and President Trump's administration and President Zelensky. But there are also lessons here when it comes to storytelling. And one of the things I've done throughout my career is I've listened to a lot of different people tell their story. And I've learned a lot of lessons, including in making some really major mistakes myself in front of, millions of people. Because as a journalist, I'm a storyteller. Guess what? Everybody's a storyteller. If you're a CEO, you're a principal, you're a small business owner, we are all constantly telling our stories. And so throughout this last several decades, I've learned a couple things along the way. And listen, there's a lot to dig in here, but I'm just going to focus on two different opportunities that came up in this conversation as two sides were trying to tell their version of the story. And if different decisions were made, we could have seen a completely different result. So this exchange and the meeting in the Oval Office actually starts off just fine. At the first 10, 15 minutes where President Trump sort of presents his position about what's happening here with the war in Ukraine and negotiating with Russia, and President Zelensky presents his position and presents President Trump and the media some photos of the atrocities of war and talks about Ukrainian children. Both of them do a good job in sort of setting the table. So you can tell they have a different posture and different position, but they start off okay. In fact, this historic exchange between these two world leaders that we get to witness doesn't happen until really the last 10 minutes. Before that, you have 40 minutes of, business as usual, sort of. Typically, this sort of press availability inside the Oval Office is very quick. The press comes in, you have the world leaders there, you get some photographs, you get a little film, you get a little statement from everybody, and then maybe there's one or two shouted questions and everybody leaves because, there's work that needs to be done. So this is different, and President Trump and the Trump administration has established something a little bit different, which is answering more and taking more questions from the press. And these availabilities have gone longer. Long press availability, you have meetings behind closed doors, and then you have an official press conference. That's what's been established so far. And so we were in the middle of this long sort of casual press availability when then things sort of change. Before I get to just kind of looking at what happened from a strategic storytelling perspective, let me just talk about the news for a second. Although this exchange was extremely tense, and there's a lot of different opinions on it, a lot of different points of view that you're seeing on social media or maybe even feeling yourself, just zooming way out, the points that were raised are actually really important points to report on. These are the different angles of the story that oftentimes when we're speaking about the war in Ukraine, we have to hold together at one time. You have President Zelensky asking a very good question. What is going to make this time different? My country's been at war for years. We've worked with many different American administrations. Well, what do you guys got that's different, that's going to get a different result? The Trump administration is saying, we're going to try to do something different because we're actually going to engage Russia, and we're going to do it in a different way. We're a new administration with a new mandate from the American people and a new style. We're going to talk to all sides, and you're going to have to trust us because what you've done in the past hasn't worked. And by the way, if we're going to change, we need you to change too. How are you going to change, President Zelensky, to make this work? If those are your stories that you're entering with, how do you tell them in an effective way so that whoever is listening to your point of view, they really feel it? Versus alienating or ending up in an argument. Here are two examples where a simple change by either party could have led to a completely different result. Okay, so everything's kind of going along swimmingly, sort of, we don't really know how everyone's feeling inside, but from the outside, it's okay. Then President Zelensky does something, and he tries to address specifically the vice president.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
And here's where Vice President Vance had a really critical moment.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
Instead of compassionately acknowledging President Zelensky's concerns about the future. Vice President Vance immediately engages with him, and now it becomes a two-person conversation. What he could have done here is said, President Zelensky, you bring up a really important point. See, he acknowledges it. Bring up a really important point. And we have some ideas on how to do things differently that will bring you and your people a different result. These are better discussed behind closed doors. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. But that didn't happen. But this would have been an off-ramp for Vice President Vance, and he could have taken the whole conversation and pushed it behind closed doors so that exchange doesn't happen. Yes, President Zelensky came for him directly, but he didn't need to take that bait. Now let's just take a look at one thing President Zelensky could have done differently. First of all, he could have not asked that question directly to the vice president. He could have just raised it to the press. And that's something that you can do with an audience that you can't do behind closed doors.
He broken this ceasefire. He killed our people and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about?
So let's say President Zelensky said, one of the things I've been reflecting on is the past. And we all, no matter where we are in our lives, very infrequently want to repeat the past. We want to move forward. And that's what the Ukrainian people want to do. And that's what I want to do too. So one of the questions I have for this team that is working so hard on our behalf is, how do we get a different result? He would have endeared himself to the audience. He would have advocated for his people, and he would not have alienated those that he was trying to negotiate with. Two key lessons here when I'm talking about effective storytelling. One is acknowledgement does not equal agreement, but acknowledgement can lead to agreement. Vice President Vance didn't need to agree with President Zelensky in that moment, but he could have acknowledged what he was saying and then tried to advance the cause in his direction. For President Zelensky, he really needed to think about, who is his audience here? Is the audience Vice President Vance, or was he speaking to the world? Perhaps he would not be as focused in proving this point with Vice President Vance. 2 tips with effective storytelling. Acknowledgement does not equal agreement, but, One is acknowledgement does not equal agreement. You can certainly acknowledge another person's point of view, even if you very much disagree with it, and then keep the conversation going to try to get to your end goal, which in this case, for both sides, is the end of the war and peace. And then the other thing is, always ask yourself this question, who is your audience here? Who are you really here for? And if you really keep yourself super focused on your audience, then you have less chance of getting off track, getting personal. Listen, easier said than done. And believe me, I have to think about that all the time too, especially with my children and my husband. But write these on Post-it notes, put them by your computer, put them on your refrigerator, put them wherever. Acknowledgement doesn't equal agreement. Who's my audience? If you have those couple tips, you will be more effective in your storytelling and your communication. Socks and effective storytelling. It's not doing what I want it to do. All I want for you is that the news consumes less of your life so that you can focus on your own developing story and hopefully effectively tell that story. So let me know if you like these tips, what your thoughts are on it. I'll get back to the socks.